Well, as you heard earlier in my conversation with Tom Mulcair, the opposition parties are calling for the Minister of Veterans Affairs to be fired. Julian Fantino's in hot water after a tense meeting with veterans in Ottawa last night. Fantino says he was stuck in a cabinet meeting and showed up more than an hour late for a planned meeting with the vets to hear their concerns over the closing of 8 Veterans Affairs offices across the country. Instead, he sent 3 Conservative MPs, and then Fantino finally did show up late, just as the vets were about to hold a news conference to express their anger at the minister. And that led to this exchange.
So are you going to train 600 people so you'll have one in every one of those facilities for us?
They will be trained up to look after your issues.
So you're going to 600 places, you guarantee us that there's going to be someone there in every one of those places to look after us?
Well, you know, this finger pointing stuff doesn't really work very well with me.
Oh, well, that's just too bad. It don't work well with us that you didn't turn up at a meeting that you were supposed to turn up to. And don't give me this thing about something came up. You bushwhacked us. It's a bunch of bullshit is all we get from this politician, and he should not be in office, and I'd like to see him resign.
I was getting upset, and matter of fact, I was crying in there. Because I kept...
Well, that was the scene here last night in Ottawa. Julian Fantino issued an apology today for missing the meeting and has contacted the vets involved personally, or says he will, although some of them say they still haven't been contacted. That didn't stop the opposition parties from going after the minister in question period today.
When the veterans complained that the minister had missed their meeting, he said, quote, "I'm not going to stand here and listen to that," and he stormed out. Excellent. How is that acceptable to the Prime Minister? Will the Prime Minister do the right thing, apologize himself, and fire that incompetent?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has apologized for the events of yesterday, but the fact of the matter is that this government and this Minister have increased services for our veterans without precedent. This is an important priority for our government. It always has been to protect those who wear the uniform and who once wore the uniform, which is why we have overwhelming support for veterans and will continue to serve them.
They're going to be closing 8 more veterans hospitals. One is in Charlottetown, PEI, where they've just doubled the ministerial staff. Why is it more important for them to find budgets for their ministerial staff than to help Canadian veterans who risk their lives for our country?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
What the Leader of the NDP won't accept is that sometimes government officials and bureaucrats make mistakes. When that happens, it is up to the elected government to make sure they do the right thing, which is what the Minister has done in this particular case. And more generally, Mr. Speaker, when we have a small number of duplicative veterans offices that have a very small caseload, it makes a lot more sense. I know the unions don't like it. It makes a lot more sense to have 600 points of service for veterans that will be close to them.
All right, those exchanges between Tom Mulcair and Stephen Harper. Then later in question period, Julian Fantino issued this apology in response to an opposition question.
Mr. Speaker, I absolutely regret yesterday's events, and as I did last evening, I apologize directly to the veterans, and again, I apologize now. I wanted to meet with them to hear their case and their stories and explain to them the changes that we are making that will, in fact, look after their interests and their families in the long term. I reached out to veterans from yesterday to reiterate that apology, Mr. Speaker.
Well, let's follow up on this with 3 members of Parliament. Well, from the foyer of the House of Commons this evening, joined by Laurie Hahn, a Conservative MP from Edmonton, a former fighter pilot, so that makes him a veteran, and he was at that meeting last night with some of those angry veterans on Parliament Hill. Peter Stauffer is the Veterans Affairs critic for the official opposition, and Joyce Murray is the Veterans Affairs critic for the Liberal Party. Good to see you all. Thanks for taking time to speak with me tonight about this. Laurie Hahn, let me start with you. You were at that meeting last night, as I mentioned. What happened there? The ministers apologized today for missing the meeting, but it seems not so much for the kind of confrontation that took place with the veterans and some of the finger-pointing comments and so on. I guess a lot of people wondering, could the minister have been a little more sensitive to these veterans when he met them, showing up over an hour late for that meeting?
Well, there are kind of two aspects to that.
Yep.
The original meeting was scheduled, I think, for 4 o'clock, and there were three of us there: Aaron O'Toole, Parm Gill, and myself. The minister was in a cabinet meeting with the Prime Minister, in fact, advocating for veterans benefits. We made it clear to the vets that the minister was there. He was going to try to get to the meeting as soon as he could. At 4:35, we had to go up to votes, and obviously we couldn't put that off. The minister didn't make it. The cabinet meeting went over. Some of the vets were upset and angry. Frankly, they were angry to begin with. So we went away and voted. The minister tracked them down between votes and their press conference with the intention to say, look, I'm sorry, I got held up. Yeah. They basically were very angry, accused him of lying about being in a cabinet meeting, that sort of thing. I mean, the whole thing, obviously was unfortunate on all sides. Okay, so the minister did not stiff them or stand them up. He was in a cabinet meeting advocating on their behalf.
So do you think there was anything wrong with the way Julian Fantino behaved in that exchange with the veterans, saying, look, the finger-pointing stuff doesn't really work with me?
Well, he was getting attacked, and there's no question. They were angry. There's no question. They came angry. They left angry. Would he do it differently the next time? Sure, he would. You get thrown into one of those things, and it's always a little dangerous when you get into something like that you're not sure what's going to go on. It's going to be confrontational. There's cameras there and so on. He admits today that he could have handled it better, and there's no question.
Okay, Mr. Stauffer, what's your view of this? The minister's apologized for missing the meeting with the vets. What weight do you give that apology?
Well, I actually witnessed the entire episode yesterday, and I was quite saddened by it all. And my 16 and a half years as a member of Parliament, through 10 ministers, through 2 different parties, yesterday was the most unfortunate circumstance that I've ever witnessed. What Mr. Fantino should have done, I understand he's apologized, but what he should be doing right now in order to make amends in this regard is to immediately call those veterans, arrange for some sort of a meeting, to be able to sit down and take your time and talk to them. The veterans may not like the response he gives them, which is fine. I mean, governments make decisions. You can agree or disagree. But what's most important is that they're heard and that they're understood and that there are consequences for the decisions that you made. And it could have been handled extremely well yesterday. And on top of that, when you saw a letter that went out from the department to a widower in out west from a woman that unfortunately took her own life, asking for money back, compounding that.
Canadian Forces personnel.
Yeah, it showed you that somebody in that department wasn't paying attention to the details of this concern. You combine that with that, the insensitivity yesterday was unfortunate, and I wish the minister had taken a different
Okay, well, I'll come back to that issue of the woman out west. Joyce Murray, what is your reaction and your response to the minister's handling of this whole situation with the vets last night here in Ottawa?
Well, Peter, first of all, you've assigned me a new portfolio, I think.
I'm sorry.
A critic for national defense.
That is my mistake. I appreciate
it. I'm really surprised at Laurie justifying what was completely unacceptable behavior by saying that the veterans came angry and they went away angry. In fact, Minister Fantino did apologize and apologized in the House today, and I think that people accept his apology. But what was beneath that kind of dismissive attitude is just more. It just represents the kind of not listening to the veterans and the kind of undermining that's happening. The veterans themselves yesterday said that they feel betrayed and insulted. And so this is a government that is just failing the very people who stood up for Canada, and this government is not standing up for them.
Well, let's drill down a little bit here on the issue. Laurie Hahn, at the heart of this story is the closure of these 8 regional Veterans Affairs offices. The Prime Minister is making the case today that, look, the closing of these offices will actually improve service for vets. How is that?
Well, first let me go back to that letter. That letter was sent out to the family by a bureaucrat bureaucrat following rules. As soon as the minister found out about it, clearly that was inappropriate. As soon as the minister found out about it, he corrected that. So for Thomas Mulcair to suggest that the minister somehow was involved with sending that letter out was frankly a little bit dishonest. With respect to the whole issue of the closures and how we deliver services across the board, we are trying to evolve the service delivery for Veterans Affairs to, frankly, the 21st century. And there's many different ways now of delivering services. There's obviously face-to-face and so on. There's emails, there's phone lines, there's a variety of ways, not each of which will apply or be appropriate for any particular veteran.
Right, but as you know, in some of these cases, some of these vets were saying yesterday that some of these home visits, which used to take a couple of days to arrange, are now taking 6 weeks to arrange.
Well, they don't know that. We're not there yet. We're at the point where the offices are going to close on Friday. There's going to be a fully qualified Veterans Affairs caseworker in each of those locations in the Service Canada office. Other Service Canada employees are being trained up as we speak for some of the other 600 offices across the country. And, it's always going to be a work in progress. We're always going to be evaluating how things are going, and we'll adjust as required.
So, Mr. Stauffer, what about that? The government says the vets will get in many cases better service than they're getting now with the closing of these offices. They can go to the 600 Service Canada sites across the country, or they can get help online. What's wrong with that?
It's simply not acceptable. I've already had veterans go to Service Canada offices across the country, and almost unanimous were told, here's the 1-800 number, and the computers in the corner wish you the best. And the fact is, when you take 13 or 15 people away from an office and put one in another office, it simply is unacceptable. The math isn't there. And the fact is, it takes many, many years and a lot of training in order to do the job that these current Veteran Affairs employees do in these offices.
Okay, so what do we owe them? And I'll quickly get an answer from you and then move to Joyce Murray and then back to Laurie Hahn. I mean, one of the veterans was saying to us here yesterday at CPAC that one of the things he liked about the regional office is that you could walk in there almost any time without an appointment and see somebody. Now, there's two things there. It's great to be able to do that, but on the service side, it suggests that there wasn't enough traffic moving through that office if you could walk in anytime you wanted and see somebody without having to make an appointment. What about that?
But, sir, bear in mind, there's almost 700,000 retired military and RCMP veterans and dependent spouses in this country. DVA only has a client base of just over 200,000. So more than 2/3 of the community is not being serviced now by DVA. If you increase those numbers, especially the returnees from Afghanistan and many others, you're going to see quite an influx of very complicated cases. And they require and deserve, you ask what they deserve? They deserve to have that one-on-one time with the veterans, RCMP members and their families in order to deal with the concerns that they're dealing with.
Okay, Joyce Murray, what's your view on that? This balance that governments try to achieve between, cost cutting in some cases and what we feel we owe people who sacrificed for this country.
Well, the government talks about evolving services when this is frankly just a pure budget cut. I mean, there's a 22% budget cut. They're laying off almost 800 staff. As Peter said, at a time that the Afghanistan war and some of those injuries are starting to become apparent. But Peter, I think the context for this is that it is on top of a whole set of other things in which the veterans feel they're not being heard and they're not being respected. And whether that's that they have to take the government to court to get benefits to which they're entitled, or whether it's the intransigence on the new Veterans Charter, where the most severely incapacitated are losing pensions, losing benefits at age 65. It's a whole package, and this is just the latest insult.
Well, let's go from that point, Laurie Hahn, and we've talked sort of around it. Let's get to the case of this the family of this soldier in Calgary who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, committed suicide. Was asked, the family was, to repay $581.67 after her death because of a benefits overpayment because she died before the end of the month. As you say, the minister stepped in, canceled that order by his department. But does it raise questions about, I guess, a need to look at the sensitivity across the department, because we're going to face more of this, aren't we, as you well know, with more and more soldiers who've served in Afghanistan confronting some of these issues?
Well, first of all, the rate of suicide in the Canadian Forces is the same as the rate in society. With this particular case...
Yeah, I'm not talking just about the suicide case. I'm just an overall treatment of vets that need help.
In this particular case, it was insensitivity on the part of whatever bureaucrat sent that out. They they were following, the
rules.
But clearly it was insensitive, and as soon as it came to the minister's attention, it was corrected. Now there's 685,000 veterans in Canada, of which I'm one. There's 209,000 who are clients of Veterans Affairs. It's not that the other 500,000 are not being served. I'm not being served because I haven't asked to be served. If I have a problem, I will apply and I will get served. 90% of the case files in Veterans Affairs are for hearing loss. So when you start narrowing it down, like I say, let's drill down to the number of real cases. The real cases of folks in severe need and so on, is relatively speaking small, and those are the folks we're trying to concentrate on.
Let me get to
they lose all these. Sorry, I'm losing my ears.
Okay,
here.
quick comments here from two of your colleagues to finish up, Mr. Toffer.
Sure.
About the need for, is there a need for sort of a rethink on how Veterans Affairs works and deals with the people they serve as we move forward here?
There's no question about that, and I like to remind everyone that the minister is always responsible for his department. So letters that leave his department, even though they may be from lower level bureaucrats in that regard, he is ultimately the captain of the ship and he is responsible.
And that's why he fixed it.
And these things never should have happened in the first place. So I'm hoping, I would assume that the government's going to learn from this lesson and have a complete overhaul rethink on how services of this nature and documentation is sent out in a much more sensitive manner. And I hope that'll happen.
Joyce Murray, let me get a final comment from you.
Blaming the bureaucrat is just another signal of this government's lack of respect. They need to really rethink their attitude towards veterans and change the fact that they're cutting off benefits before the end of the month and sending these letters out. This isn't the first time this happened. If they had respect for the veterans, they would have changed that already and made sure that the payment for the full month is available.
All right, appreciate all of you for your time this evening. Thanks for speaking with me, and I'll hope to chat with you all again soon.
You bet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, many in Canada were watching the State of the Union address last night by the U.S. President, hoping for any